Now, during war and conflict, women and girls usually bear the brunt of the violence. Many are raped, beaten and killed. The International Rescue Committee provides counseling and other services to sexual violence victims. To discuss this further, we are joined by Elizabeth Roesch, IRC's Women's Protection and Empowerment Advocacy Officer. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we know that there's been a reported spike in sexual violence in Ivory Coast during the conflict. Can you tell us the extent of it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we're seeing right now are really alarming levels of sexual violence. This has been a really defining feature of the current crisis, but one that's too often been neglected. The stories we're hearing are heartbreaking. We hear of women being attacked by armed groups in their homes, in public, in front of their family and community members. As they try to flee violence, they're being stripped naked and assaulted at checkpoints and on roads. Between December and March of this year, we've seen a fourfold increase in the number of survivors we support.
And those are only those that come forward and report, and those that are witnesses, that are witnessed. There are obviously thousands others that maybe many don't know about.
Absolutely. I think it's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I think we've seen that insecurity has prevented women from accessing vital services and coming forward to report. So really, we're just looking at the fraction of the overall number.
Now, you've been working mostly in the western part of Ivory Coast and in Liberia, where
Yes.
there's been a lot of activity, movements back and forth across borders. What kind of counseling services and referral services are you offering to these women?
Well, the International Rescue Committee has been working in both Ivory Coast and Liberia for quite a while now. And so our priority in emergency is to make sure that a woman recovers from this experience. Often that will mean getting her access to basic health care, some sort of emotional or social support, and then finding a safe place to make sure that she is safe and able to recover.
Now, obviously, a lot of them are traumatized, and they fear just by coming out to say what happened to them that they'll face all sorts of reprisals, rejection by their families. But I think also more importantly is, so what? What will happen to, say, the perpetrators? What will happen to those who have done this?
Yeah.
Is there any retribution, any justice?
I mean, I think we see too often this happens in silence, and we don't see real accountability. The women that have come forward to the International Rescue Committee have told us that they don't feel heard. So not only that perpetrators aren't being held accountable, but that their voices and what's happening to them is not being recognized. And that is really very disempowering and very sad to hear.
What about these perpetrators? What is the possible justice that these women can face, at least knowing that somebody is pursuing the fact that, you know, they raped and they committed atrocities that people can actually attest to?
Yeah. I mean, I think that if a woman who has experienced violence wants to pursue justice, we help her to do that, to access the legal remedies that are available. Too often, they're insufficient, and I think that usually you're looking at some sort of broader-based accountability measures, really looking back, saying what happened, and having people speak out, whether that violence be recognized in their own communities, by their governments, or by the international community. That's also a very important role of justice.
Now, Elizabeth, you were in Ivory Coast about a year ago, and you know what is so amazing is that you're still dealing with not just the most current of incidents, the violence, but those from 2003 at the previous conflict, and also in Liberia. So this is a really long process, isn't it, for a lot of the women who are subjected to violence, sexual violence?
Absolutely. We see in conflict after conflict that when the official conflict comes to an end, violence against women does not stop. This is something that we'll have to deal with for years and decades. We've seen that in Liberia, we've seen that in Ivory Coast, we've seen that in many, many crises the world over.
So here's the most fundamental question. How does a woman protect herself, knowing that she's very vulnerable because there's lawlessness all around her? What does she do?
I mean, that's a very hard thing. I mean, I think that when a woman comes to report violence to us, we try to find a space for her to be safe. Often people are facing retribution, risk of being rejected by their families for even speaking out. So it's vitally important to find a safe space. But I think, you know, it's really the responsibility of communities and governments to provide that protection. Women shouldn't have to face this violence.
Well, thank you so much. Elizabeth Roesch with the International Rescue Committee. Thanks so much for joining us today with this very important topic.
Thank you.